I call the Honourable Minister, Judith Collins.
Mr Speaker, Happy New Year to you and to the House. Mr Speaker, it is in fact with great pride that I speak in this debate, because I am also privileged to be the Minister of Justice, the Minister of ACC and the Minister of Ethnic Affairs. And I would like to take the opportunity to acknowledge my colleagues in the justice sector, the Honourable Anne Tolley, the Honourable Christopher Finlayson, the Honourable Chester Burrows, and our Chief Executives for the very hard work and concerted work of working together that they have done over the last 2 years. Can I also acknowledge in the ACC area the Honourable Craig Foss, who's the Associate Minister for ACC. Craig and I work very well together, and he has done sterling work, particularly over the last 2 years. And in the Ethnic Affairs area, I'd like to acknowledge Melissa Lee, the Parliamentary Private Secretary for Ethnic Affairs, and all of our Ethnic Affairs team in National, which I have to say are a fantastic team working together for the people of New Zealand. Now, the member who has just resumed his seat made some very interesting comments about what he had learnt in his local newspaper about what was happening in his local electorate. Let me give him a piece of advice, Mr Speaker. As an electorate MP, he should not be getting his stories out of his local newspaper. He should be giving the stories to the local newspaper. He should be getting up off his chuff, getting around to the garage, getting the story, getting these people, helping them to get their home through Housing Corp or some other provider. That's what electorate MPs do. They don't sit around waiting for the newspaper to give them the stories. And I understand that there's a couple of list MPs over the other side of the House who don't agree with me. Well, let me just tell them that's how it works in the real world when you're an electorate MP and you want to stay one. Mr Speaker, today is the first day that I've been able to speak in the House this year, because I have been representing New Zealand at the Human Rights Council at the United Nations in Geneva. And I have to say it was a very proud experience for me, because New Zealand's record on human rights is frankly second to none. And I'd like to say that the good thing is the Labour Party was still on holiday, so they couldn't actually put out a press release attacking New Zealand or our record on human rights. However, the Greens weren't. So Jan Logie of the Greens put out a press release, and many other comments she made, which you would have thought, if you'd listened to it, New Zealand was one of the worst countries in the world for human rights. Actually, Mr Speaker, we're pretty much the best. The response that we got from other nations to our report, where we acknowledged, for instance, that we want to do so much better as a country when it comes to things like domestic violence, when we acknowledged that children still live in poverty, a relative poverty, but having said that, look at our immunisation rates, look at the way we have our rates of early childhood education, look at the way in which people are given a chance to get ahead. We acknowledge those as well. We're never going to be perfect, because nobody ever can in the real world, but we're always going to keep trying to be. And instead, what do we get from the Greens? These people who want to be in government with the Labour Party and how many other parties that need to put together? Well, we got the next day after that. This week, what do we get? We got them bullying Nauru, and refusing to apologise for bullying Nauru on their record. For goodness sake, why don't these people just get to work and get a decent living, or do a decent living, instead of attacking every country in the world except those that they think are going to do whatever they want? So Nauru has its challenges, so do all countries, but we should applaud where people get ahead, applaud where they improve their human rights record, and applaud where there is democracy. These are the things that we want to applaud. So, Mr Speaker, one of the things that we need in the country is we need a lack of corruption. And this country has been recorded by the International Transparency as having the least corrupt country in the world by perception of the public on our public service for the last 8 years in a row, either first or first equal. This is a fantastic record, and what it does is it says to New Zealanders, when you come to New Zealand, when you want to get a passport, you don't have to pay a bribe. What you do is you go through the normal process, and in New Zealand that is something we should value. Crime generally, Mr Speaker, 5 years after we came to government, recorded crime is down to the lowest level it's been in 33 years. When I came into Parliament and when I came in as Minister of Police in 2008, I was told that we could do nothing about the crime in Counties Manukau Policing District in South Auckland, where my electorate Papakura was. I was told that this was all demographics. Utter rubbish, Mr. Speaker, utter rubbish. What it is, it needed policing, it needed smart policing, it needed preventative policing, it needed a strong morale, it needed a government that backed the police, and that's exactly what we did. All these years later, what have we got? 5 years later, crime is down to its lowest level in 33 years. And we've set better public service targets and results. So our targets are, by 2017, reduce overall crime rates by 15%, violent crime by 20%, youth crime by 25%. And where we are at the moment, total crime is down by 12%, violent crime is down by 8%, youth crime is down by 19%, and we've still got 3 years to go on these targets. So, Mr. Speaker, what we're seeing is things are changing. We got the alcohol reform bill through. We changed the law on alcohol. In fact, just before Christmas, what did I get from the Green Mayor of Wellington? I got condemned by her because we did not think it was all right for people to be out drinking on the streets until 6 o'clock in the morning. And she wrote to me and said this was dreadful, it was stopping business. These are the same people who rally in day out about alcohol, but apparently all other drugs are all right, except, of course, when they're running for local government or to be members of Parliament. What else did we do? Well, we brought in maximum jail sentences with no parole for the worst serious violent offenders under the 3 strikes law. One of the other previous Labour spokespeople on Law and Order and Justice said that they were going to get rid of that. That was about 4 people back, so I'm not quite sure if that's still their position. It certainly is the Greens' position. We brought in tougher sentences for crimes against children. Now it is a crime to stay silent if you know a child or a vulnerable person is at risk. We brought in tougher sentences for involvement in gangs, and we brought in 24-hour GPS monitoring for highest risk and child sex offenders out on release in the community. We've toughened up and strengthened the bail laws, and we've done this with support of other parties in the House who believe that this is important. We've also made 17 to 19-year-olds subject to adult tests for bail if they've served time. And what we've done is we've made it a lot easier for police to do their job. We know there's 600 extra police on the front line. We also know, and we heard again today from the Honourable Anne Tolley, that the technology that police are now using means that they can spend more time on the front line, less time back at the office. We've had 70% more police foot patrols in 2012. The police now have tasers, lockboxes in their cars, DNA testing of offenders, smartphones and tablets. What we have is we now have a much safer New Zealand. And the police aren't just getting tough on things, they're getting smart on things. We've got pre-charge warnings, 41,000 of them in the 24 months up to May last year. That means actually dealing with issues straight away rather than waiting 6 or 7 months for a court case. Rolling out the smartphones, illegal street racing offences. Remember that? Remember how the Labour Party said our law wouldn't help? Well, by the way, it's down 35%. There's huge changes, clamp down on gangs, organised crime and methamphetamine. And the big thing, Mr Speaker, the change that's different from all the other years that Labour were in office, is we've put our victims first. We've put victims first, we've brought them back into the system, and we've said that we will not censor them when they want to say what they want to say in their victims' impact statements. We're bringing in the Harmful Digital Communications Bill, Public Protection Orders, Parole Amendment Act, Objectionable Publications and Decency legislation, Victims' Orders Against Violent Offenders Bill and Victims of Crime Reform Bill. Mr Speaker, this is a government that works very seriously and works very well on justice and law and order issues, and I'd like to say to my colleagues, thank you for the support and the backing you've given us, and thank you to the people of New Zealand for giving us the privilege of continuing to do this work.
Mr Speaker.
I call the honourable member David